Welcome to this quick run through of some of the options on the P47. We're currently at lovely Ketchikan, I hope I got that right, and we've set up a couple of the P47s on the runway, so you can see here, this is us right here. So what we'll do is we'll pop inside and we'll fire up all the options and show you some of the other options that are available to you when you use the P47. First things first, I thought I might just show you that there is in fact a manual available. We'll be going through a lot of what appears in here, not so much the landing and the startup, you know, you've got that to work out yourselves, etc. But certainly through some of the features further down. So we'll just go down to where we find the features, lots of stuff. So we'll be looking through this options panel and all the options that are available to you in the features and options, including fuel loadouts, engine removal, etc, etc. Also, apologies if you hear some of the Australian wildlife. I live out in a rural area within Australia, so you may very well hear dogs, crows, kangaroos, drop bears killing tourists, etc, etc. Anyway, on with the show. So when you're inside the cockpit, you have a number of different things that you can do. Certainly you can start the plane, but before you start the plane, it's always a good idea to set up your options, in my opinion, anyway. So to do that, you need to go over to the P47 options switch on the left-hand side here. You'll see that it's highlighted there. Clicking that button gets you the P47 loadout screen, and you're presented with a graphical representation of the P47 from the front, and a number of switches, and including a warning light that you see there. That will come into effect as we play around with these knobs on the front. Let's get the big gotcha out of the way straight away. You're looking at the P47 from the front, which means that this left knob is in fact the right pylon, and the left pylon is the right knob. Yes, it did my head in as well. It did everyone's head in at Aeroplane Heaven. And in fact, our testers kept saying, why can't you see it from the back? But then you wouldn't see the what you're loading up. So not really helpful. Okay, so let's start on this side. We'll start down here on this right-hand side of the P47 loadout screen. And you'll see that we have the ability to choose between the wartime pilot, which looks like this, and the default Asobo pilot, which looks like this. We'll go back to the cockpit and we'll turn back on the wartime pilot. There is a small pause between when it switches between the default and the wartime pilot the first time you use it. That's purely because you're actually having to load in the Asobo pilot and all the textures that come with it. Below that switch, you'll find a three-way switch. Currently, it's showing you the NB3 gun sight that's up there. We'll go to the bring it to the MK8 gun sight. And I'll show you that a little bit later after we've got out of this screen. And then, of course, we've also got the GPS, which is currently off due to the fact that the battery is actually off. We'll leave it in the GPS so that it doesn't get in the way of some of the others. Actually, no, we'll put it in the Mark 8. There we go. We have a warning light, which I'll show you a little later. And we also have, which is the perfect time because we've got nothing on our stores, either on the right side, center, or left side, we can actually remove the wing pylons. Now, you won't see a change in the screen, but these pylons here outside, and I'll go there now, do in fact show a difference. So here we are back in the cockpit. We'll turn the remove wing pylons back on, or should I say reinstall them, so that we can now put stores on them. Just out of passing, this will actually automatically turn back on, as in install the wing pylons should you put some stores on. Let's start with the right side first. And you'll find that if we go to the move to the right, you'll see that we put on a 75-gallon tank, should I say, a 108-gallon tank, a 150-gallon tank, and depending on the store you got this from, you'll find that you've got a bomb 500 pounds and a bomb 1,000 pound. We're going to leave it with 75. A couple of things that you can see in the loadout screen already. First of all, the representation is representing the 75-gallon tank on the right pylon. You can also see that the warning light, handily called warn, is on. This is warning telling you that your weight is out. So let's quickly hop outside to see what this looks like before we make changes. So as you can see there, we've got the 75-gallon on the right wing. Now that I'm back inside the cockpit, I'll bring up the weight and balance window, and you'll see that our CG is out of balance. This warning light is not intelligent to tell you which side is out of balance, only that it is in fact out of balance. We'll also discuss this area over here in a moment, but what we should do is try to get it back into balance. So I'll just roll this up out of the way for now, and we'll go onto the left pylon, and you'll just see as soon as we put a 75-gallon on the left side, the warning light goes out. Now, of course, if we put a 108-gallon on the left-hand side, then of course the warning light is back on, because of course 108 gallons is got more weight than 75 gallons. To see what that looks like, that's what this looks like out here. Now, let's have a look and see what's happened in the weight and balance area. First, what we should do is just go back to the 75 gallons so that we're within the correct balance. You will see that it automatically has put in the correct amount of fuel. 75 gallons in this case on the left and 75 gallons on the right. With this open, I'll just see if I can, I'll tell you what, we'll just pull this out of the way. We know that the CG will be out. If I put in 108 gallons, you'll see that there is indeed 108 gallons added to the weight. So, what do we do now? Well, with the options screen open, the weight and balance window becomes not very useful. I'll try to make changes, for example. You'll see that it is constantly trying to change things around. It's constantly trying to set something different, and then it automatically goes back to 108 gallons. Same with the 75 gallons. Goes back to the 75 gallons. That is because the code of the loadout screen is overwriting the weight and balance. And that is why throughout the manual, I think we say it 5 or 6 times, do not fly with the options window open. With the options window closed, and we'll just go back over here and close the options window, we can now change this to our heart's content. So, for example, if we wanted the 108-gallon tank on the left side, and we changed it to almost exactly the same amount of gallons on either side, our balance is correct, but the two tanks are very different. So the key here is shut down the options screen once you have set your options. I'm also very aware that it says 400 pounds for the pilot. It's actually 200 pounds. I was playing around with it before the start of the video. He's not a porky bloke. Okay, so let's turn the options panel back on, and you'll see as soon as you do that, it changes these values back to 108 and 75 gallons. Now on the center drop tank, shouldn't have any effect on the warning at all, but you can see that it will not add the amount of gallons into this area right here because we haven't set it down in the knob section. So we're going to add the special extra 200 gallons in the center, and what we'll do is to get rid of the warning light, we'll just put 75 on the outside, and that shows you what we've got outside. Now, here's where some issues may come if you think that you could go, for example, and add 500 pounds to the left pylon. You can break the logic. We don't want you to do this. So the key here is to ensure that you set your options up and then close the screen once you're finished with it before making edits to the weight and balance that you see here. I have just modified my eye point so that I can show you where the fuel valve selectors are. Now the main one, which is the one that I'm hovering over here, this one right here, it's called the main fuel selector. It's currently in the off position. You have 4 if counting the off position options. You have external tanks, main tanks, and auxiliary tanks. When you start and take off on a P47, it is of vital importance that you use the main tanks. As soon as you're up in the air, what people tend to do and what they want you to do in the real world is to use the auxiliary tanks, then the external tanks, and then the main tanks. And external tanks only if you have them. How this works is basically the engine is going to draw from whatever you have selected in this main fuel tank selector. When you have the main fuel tank selector in external tanks, the tank it draws from is then taken from the one down on the floor. Currently it's in the off position. Now if, for example, you're flying along and you actually have got your tank in the external tanks, fear not, there's enough fuel in the lines to keep the engine running, but quickly choose a fuel tank that you wish to use. In this position, we've told the main fuel tank selector to look for a tank that is guided by the external fuel tank selector, and in this case, it's drawing it from the left tank. You can of course draw from the right tank, the center tank, and this is the off position for the external tank fuel selector, whereupon you would choose one, either the main or auxiliary, or worst case scenario, if you've run out completely, off. Just a quick note, there are no fuel levels for the external tank. It is up to you to know your fuel mileage and what you're getting there. Still in the cockpit of the P47, we have made a warning light on the top right corner of the gauge set to remove the engine panels. These engine panels are only available if the engines are off and that you are on the ground. So ensure that your parking brake is on, because some of these airfields are actually on a slope. Clicking it will open up the engine covers and the light will go. Now you might be saying to yourself, hey, the battery's off, how is the light going? This is a fake warning light. It is just to tell you that the engine covers are off. And if we were to go outside and just make our way out to the area there, you'll see that the engine covers are in fact off and they're on the ground there, and you've now can perform much needed maintenance, because if you're anything like me, you certainly don't keep your engine clean. These engine covers will automatically go back on once the engine is started and or you're moving. Please bear that in mind. If you land and suddenly the engine covers come off, it's because you've forgotten to turn off the engine cover removal, which is right here. Go on. Pilot removal is as simple as using the weight and balance window and removing the weight of the pilot. So in this case, he's 200 pounds, correctly this time around. If we make him 0 pounds, I'm just using the keyboard here and hitting enter, you'll see that he disappears from view. If I go back in and add 200, not 2,000, that would be a very heavy man. Add 200 pounds back and he's back. This works with the Asobo pilot as well as the wartime pilot. Okay, let's have a quick discussion on the recognition lights. In-game, we've only done the 3 recognition lights, which are on the underside of the right wing on the P47. During wartime, at the briefing, before they would head out, a certain set of different types of lights, and whether they be steady or flashing, are handed to the pilots each day, and they change each day, obviously for recognition point of view. We have something very similar available to us here in game. So for an example, if I wanted the red one, and we'll put it to key, and we'll put the green one to steady, and we leave the amber one off, if I go outside and we make our way out to the other side, underneath here, we'll see that they aren't on. Is this a mistake? No, of course not. I've forgotten to set the battery. So let's go back into the interior, switch the battery on, hop back outside, and you'll see that the red light is flashing, the green light is on or steady, and the amber is off. So whatever you decide to use is up to you entirely per sortie. Just make sure that you do in fact set them correctly before you come back into land. Or you may find yourself on the wrong end of an anti-aircraft gun. So you might be wondering, why am I showing you the control options? Well, we have to set one control option for you to use the guns and gun effects. Now, if you've bought this plane from the marketplace, this functionality does not exist by default. Certainly not on Xbox should it come to Xbox. However, if you've bought it elsewhere, or you enable the functionality, then what you need to do is search for water rudder, and you'll see that it turns up in the screen if you use the search function up here, and you'll see that I already have set mine to Control W. So I don't need to set it. Make sure that you set it to something. It could be something on your keyboard if you think you're going to use this functionality a lot, or whatever you want to use. I'll just go back and we'll resume. Now, with Control W set, we can go to the outside. You can hear it on the inside, but of course you really want to see it from the outside. And you can hit Control W on the keyboard. Now you really shouldn't be doing this on the ground unless you are... Wow. They really love to park madly here. We got a... Oh, lovely. Excellent. So now we are here on the outside, and we'll just fire our guns. You're not really supposed to do them on the ground unless you are calibrating the guns, but we can easily fire the guns by just hitting Control W. And yes, you'll hear, it's very loud for me, probably not for you, but yes, you can hear the dulcet sounds of the 50 cal. And if we roll around here, if you're firing on the ground, you'll notice that the cartridges are not coming out of the bottom. That is purely because it looked really weird. So the cartridges do occur when you're up in the air. Speaking of getting up into the air, we should get up into the air because I must show you how the blower works on the P47 as designed by Aeroplane Heaven. What I wanted to do is show you how the blower works on the P47 as designed by the Aeroplane Heaven team. Now, it's a little different to the real thing, primarily because some of the functionality of the real thing can't be done easily enough in-game. However, what you've got is when you first start the engine, you'll see that this light turns on. And as you increase your blower amount, you'll see that your turbo RPM increases, and this light starts flashing. You'll also see an increase on the manifold pressure. Just keep an eye on the manifold pressure. It's much smaller than the amount that the turbo RPM is. The key here and the trick here is when you're flying a P47 is to keep this indicator constantly flashing. Now we're currently paused, so what I do here isn't going to affect anything too much. However, if for example you push your boost lever beyond the level of the throttle, you'll see that it is in fact now fully steady. It is not flashing whatsoever. You get the same if you pull it all the way back to the back. This is indicating that you are overspeed on the turbine, or that it's not engaged correctly. So what you need to do is keep it flashing. Another quick tip that the P47 pilots in the day say is never let your boost lever get any further forward than the throttle lever. So currently I've got my throttle on at 50%. So once my boost lever goes beyond 50%, of course it's now over speed. One other thing while we're talking about the throttle is we have made just this area here a draggable area, primarily because the mixture setting and the propeller is directly underneath, as you can hear there and see the RPM. Both of them are underneath the throttle lever. So we've just made this part right here draggable, just so that you've got a little bit of the ability to not have to change your eye point, just to choose how you want to use your propeller, pitch control, and your mixture control. So we're back into the cockpit, and I'd like to show you two last little options and features of the P47. The first one is the oxygen. And it is as simple as clicking the oxygen available, whereupon the blinker will show, and eventually your oxygen cylinder pressure will decrease over time. I'll just turn that off, just because it can be a little annoying. The second thing I'd like to show you, and that's why I'm in this odd looking position, is the jettison levers, both the left, the right and the belly. Currently, if I pop out into the drone view for a moment, you'll see that I've got two 75-gallon fuel tanks and a large 200-gallon fuel tank. Let's go back into the cockpit. Now, when you land a P47, it is of vital importance that you do not have any drop tanks. The whole idea behind drop tanks is to actually drop the tank. So what we've done here is we've actually enabled the bomb and tank release levers so that you can pull them towards you and it will visually make the tanks disappear. Now I say visually because, well, frankly, we feel that you want to have a little bit of fun with this. We don't want you to have to reload the aircraft, or should I say reload the flight, just to get your fuel tanks back. So it's more of a visual thing. You'll still be able to land with the tanks there in inverted commas, but let's just take off, for example, the left one and the belly. Okay, now if I bring up the weight value, let's bring up the weights for a moment, you'll see that the weights shouldn't be out of whack at all. And that is because the tanks aren't actually full, but they're also only visually disappearing. They're not really. So let's just go back out to the drone view for a moment. Oh, this bug still occurs. And you'll see that even though they're disappearing, they actually are still there. The 200-gallon is still there, and if we had fuel in it, in the 75 as well, and the 200, they would still be available. So we'll just go back into the cockpit for a moment, and we'll put them back on, back to the drone, and you can see that they are in fact still there. Thank you for watching the brief run through on some of the features of the P47. We're leaving some of them behind so that you can find out what they are, because where's the fun in me showing you every single thing about the plane? Thanks and happy flying.